time period is full of pikemen, pike,
No.
shot, and cannon. And those are like the three things that come up quite a lot. Especially cannon. I'm very used to the sort of Middle Ages large cannons that get pushed around. But when I've been researching this and seeing like images of cannons, they're like so small and like relatively,
Depends,
right? They look
depends
quite
on which
convenient.
part of the period you're looking at.
Yeah,
That's the
well,
thing.
there you go, there you go.
This
So
is this is the age of the cannon development. This is where all the cannon tech
this is peak
happened.
cannon time periods, guys.
Yeah.
Peak cannon.
If you're a cannon lover, this is for you.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be talking about some awesome German mercenaries and the super soldiers of Sweden, the absolutely epic Caroleans. But first, Rob, why don't you kick off with these leather cannons you want to tell us about?
All right. So the leather cannon, interestingly, is often like attributed to Sweden as its inventor. But I did a bit of a deeper dive, and it turns out they're actually Swiss in their invention. So they were, but as made famous by the Swedes. So doing a modern reference, if you think of "Hurt" by Nine Inch Nails, a lot of people will think of the Johnny Cash song. But Johnny Cash is the man who made it famous. But real fans will know that the leather cannon is Swiss and not Swedish.
Yeah,
However, the same with that song. They're the people who made it famous. They're the ones who kind of like revolutionized its use and kind of more used it widely. So basically, it was designed to bridge that gap. So as you were talking about with the cannons being small, there were originally cannons before this point were slow, heavy artillery. So basically, once you set them up on the battlefield, that's their position. They are done. That you can't really relocate them in a pinch. So you needed to have something. So they were. So it was kind of Gustavus saw these cannons that were in use in Switzerland and went, we can make use of that, and we can, because the leather cannon is smaller, lighter, cheaper as well, so it makes a difference. We can move it around on the battlefield. So if you bring up an image of this, so this is I think is the best one I can find. I'll describe it for audio only listeners, so you don't need to see it. But it's in essence, it's a thin copper or bronze tube reinforced with tightly wound cords and finely wrapped in layers of leather. So you can kind of quite clearly, this is quite a good image to see its construction. So you can see the leathering outside the cords and then the cannon barrel in the center. So in theory, great idea. In practice, though, it was highly flawed. So the problem is, the main issue is that the heat after repeated firing had nowhere to go. So after just a few shots, it would overheat, the barrel would warp, accuracy would plummet, and also someone could say this is worse, has a risk of exploding. So probably one of the
if
worst
you
parts of
if
it,
you roll a dice, if you roll a one, right?
exactly, the cannon just blows up.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So it was as much as it gave the reliability because it wasn't reliable. It was still small to move on the battlefield. So the relocating kind of cannons became this kind of massive thing. And then when you're talking about these cannons, you're talking about these smaller metallic cannons. They're what replaced this in essence. Is they go so the concept works. This mobile cannon. However, this thing kind of sucks. So let's replace it with something that works a lot better for the future. Although really interestingly, is they were actually quite used extensively afterwards by the Scots. So there were Scots who served as officers in the Swedish army, and then they used these cannons during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, which is
Not the Chinese one.
like no, like the English Civil War, Irish. So it's between England, Ireland, and Scotland. Yeah, England, Ireland, and Scotland. And
Okay, I hadn't heard of that war, but I guess we'll probably look into
it's
that at some point.
the Civil War makes up this. What the English Civil War is what people call it generally, but the
Oh,
overall with
yeah, I've heard
the
of that.
overall
Yeah.
is called the Wars of the Three Kingdoms,
Hmm.
which is a new name for me as well. When I found out about what the naming of it. But yeah, so that they're really interesting as a kind of this first proto mobile cannon. And also a little shout out to the Koreans. They use something as well similar, but theirs was I think in tandem, and they didn't use leather. They used paper with grease as their outside. Similar issues though.
So I have a dumb question. I'm not sure if you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
answer it, but why are they wrapping it in leather at all? Why do they have to wrap it in anything?
So the reason it overheated is not the leather that's causing it to overheat. It's the rope. It's the rope as the material on the outside
Okay,
is causing the overheating.
are they trying to stop it from
The wrap
splitting? Is that part of the?
exactly. It's trying to hold it. It's trying to hold it all together. It's Yeah,
big
in
blast
essence,
going through it. It's going to have a lot of energy and force pushing outwards. So they're trying to. That's why it's
so
all like
trying to
tied so
contain it.
tightly around it to make sure it doesn't like crack. Yeah. Okay.
Because if it was just a thin metal tube, you've got one shot and it's done for.
It displays
So
like yeah.
so it was kind of, and it's intended to be this cheap light, and so it could be carried around by only two guys. Two guys could wheel it around the battlefield, and the replacement, the all metal version, needed three guys. So you did have, there was an idea behind it. The concept did make sense. It just in reality didn't work.
Gotcha. Nice. All right. I'll take it from here then. I want to talk about settlers and the fact that in the game, Sweden actually has a lower settler limit. So the number of villagers that you can create is lower than other civilizations. And this, I think, reflects Sweden's smaller population compared to other major powers. So Sweden, rather than sheer manpower, the military success often relied on the effective use of limited resources and disciplined professional armies like the Caroleans, which I'll talk more about later. Sweden was all about quality over quantity. And I think that this lower settler count, again, represents the populations. But also, one of the things that Sweden relied on is mercenaries. And in Age of Empires 3, Sweden has mercenary shipments cost less and arrive sooner, which I think is a good nod to that. The fact that they used a lot of mercenaries. In the previous episode, I talked about the 30 Years' War, and the fact that as soon as they landed, they recruited 40,000 mercenaries, and that was just the beginning, right? They
still blew my mind that number.
It is mad, these numbers. Yeah. So there's a lot of supplementary forces supporting the main elite Swedish force. But also in the game, you have access to, regardless of which map you're playing on, because in Age of Empires 3, depending on which map you're on, you have access to different mercenaries, thematic to the place you're playing on. But the Swedes will always have access to two, regardless, which is the Black Rider and the Jaeger. And it is no coincidence that these two are both German, because, as I've mentioned, the 30 Years' War, all of these German mercenaries, this is definitely a nod to the fact that Sweden often used German mercenaries. And so I wanted to talk about the Jaeger and the Black Rider and how awesome they were, especially the Black Rider, and how they fit into Sweden's plan.
I mean, just calling something the Black Rider is just cool.
Just cool, isn't it? Yeah. You just know it's going to be cool. So if the word Jaeger is familiar to you, it might be because of the Pacific Rim films or the drink Jägermeister.
That's the first thing in my head.
But so actually, Jaeger just means hunter in German. So admittedly, though, Jaeger sounds way cooler than hunter, so very much happy to call it that. The term came to reference light infantry, whose civilian occupation were hunters and foresters. So it made them good at patrolling and skirmishing independently away from the main force. They carried rifles and hunting swords called a Hirschfänger. I'm doing my best Germans, please don't. my bestes Deutsch. And aka the deer hunter. So they could also sometimes be mounted. And that's really all I'll say about Jaegers, just to save more time for the Black Riders. But essentially, Jaegers weren't so much used in the 30 Years' War. The term Jaeger wasn't used more until afterwards as an infantry mercenary. But Black Riders were. So Black Riders, also known as Devil Riders, or in German, Schwarzreiter, right? Really doing my best here. And this is because of the blackened armor that they wore. So no, Black Riders are not the guys from Lord of the Rings. If you actually,
that's also where my head goes.
Yeah, if you want to jump one image forward, actually, let's stick with this one first. So for those of you who were on watching, the Black Riders essentially have all black armor, and it's kind of like a 3/4 armor. It doesn't go all the way down. They're on horses, and they're carrying these pistols, these wheel-lock pistols, which are so cool. And that's really what this whole segment's about, because of these pistols. I just want to get into it, right? So this cavalry, they had a special tactic known as the Caroleans, and that just means a turn left, or half turn left, or a half turn right. So what these guys would do, these guys are awesome, right? They would ride up to the front line, they would turn, bang, unleash a shot with their pistol, and then as they're turning away, and then ride back. So there's this front line of people with pikes, like waiting to receive them, but they'd never actually crash into them. They would just kind of spin around, bang, and then move back, run to the back, reload, come back and do it again. And by reload, and I guess this is the bit where maybe you can go back to the pistol image just for those who are watching. By reload, I just want to I just want to say that it wasn't really a reloading kind of situation. These wheel lock pistols, I believe they're called, they may have been peak technology at the time. Took about a minute to reload, and while you're on horseback, it's not really the kind of thing you can do. There's so many like intricate things you had to do in order to get it fully reloaded. So actually what to do, just throw them away, right? Each Black Rider would have like 6 of them, and just one bang each, bang, bang. And if you ever played, and Rob, this is for you really, Vermintide, Warhammer Vermintide, and the Inquisitor character that you used to make.
I remember.
Do you remember his 2
that guy.
pistols, bang, bang, and he'd always just throw them on the ground and it would take out 2 more. That's this. That is what these pistols were, right? So it's actually really quite cool to see them in use there. So in order to understand why it's so effective, though, you got to take your mind back to the Middle Ages, where knights would wear heavy armor as their defense and sacrifice speed because it was worth it. So the earliest firearms, though, started to come into effect, and it countered that method quite hard because it would still pierce the armor, but also by this point, spearmen had become pikemen. They had 5-meter-long pikes sometimes. So even if the heavy knight, these royal knights would make their way through and get and survive the early arquebuser shots, they would then have to meet a line of 5-meter pikes. It was almost suicidal at a certain point to carry on, and that's unfortunately the tragic end of the Middle Ages knights wearing the heavy armor. But what ended up happening was lighter armor became preferred because of the speed. It just started making more sense. Black Riders being mercenaries, they wanted to maximize cost efficiency, so they would use inferior steel, and armor smiths would use acid to stop it from rusting because it's inferior steel. But this acid would also turn the armor black, which is why they're called Black Riders. They wouldn't like paint it black; it's just what they had on.
Because you think it'd be inopportune because of the heat that you would really want to have black armor. Because
at least it's only 3/4, right? Your legs were still open so that you could better control the horse.
You got the wind from riding on horse,
Yeah. With the wind sweeping through your hair, the smell of gunpowder. I'm sure these things were hella loud as well. I don't know.
Oh, I bet they are.
Speaking of these absolutely awesome pistols, and again, for those of you who are not watching, just imagine like a pistol the size of a tennis racket, maybe. It's huge, this thing, right? And these things are like highly inaccurate. And so the advice of how to use them was to not fire until you saw the whites of the enemy's eyes. That's how close it was advised you had to be before you unleash. Otherwise, you're just going to miss. In fact, some texts actually say, if you can, press it against the chest plate and then fire, just to make sure it definitely kills.
I might have some stuff to counter what you found out.
Is it? Okay, all right.
I've got some different things. When we're on to the next section, let's see.
You're going to cover these matchlock, whatever, wheel lock pistols as well?
I've got some stuff related, not directly the same, but interesting. It's really interesting to hear because I think we've both come to found different texts that said different things that have come to similar conclusions, but from different sources.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Maybe it's different time periods as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So this tactic, it would wreck enemy morale, right? Imagine standing there with like a pike, like are they gonna, and then bang, you have to like get it shot in the face essentially, and then they turn and they never actually make contact with you. It was pretty effective, and they were quite highly desirable mercenaries. But either way, Gustavus Adolphus, the Lion of the North that we covered last episode, he changed the Caracol for cavalry charge tactics. So this is during the 30 Years' War. He picked up a bunch of lessons fighting the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and he was like, you know what? And I think I'm going to quote him. So Gustavus saw the Caracol as ineffective and unmanly. Right, this idea that they would go forward and then run away and come back and shoot again. Gustavus was not about that life. Okay, so he changed the game and improved the strategy even more. He said, you go in. He said that he wanted the Swedish cavalry to rely on cold steel charge rather than firepower at a distance. He said cavalry were allowed to fire at point blank range just before impact only, or you don't fire at all. That's the rule.
I think that's the quote from when you said when he needs to be the touch in the chest plate. That's his quote about this strategy.
Oh, is that his?
That's where you heard that from. It's his specific quote.
Interesting.
That's where you heard it from.
Okay, yeah. There you go. So this is really, of course, originally German mercenaries, but incorporated into the Swedish army like this. Gustavus really just like elevated their prowess even further. He emphasized discipline, coordination, and aggression over these firepower techniques. But I'm sure we'll come back to the Black Riders and the Jaegers at some point when we cover our Germany episode.
This is Rob from the future, or maybe the past, asking us to leave a 5-star and a like on the podcast wherever you're listening to. Thank you, and back to the podcast.
So one last thing I learned from the Caracol again, from the back of what you were saying, which is it stopped because of its effectiveness, and it was just because of the inaccuracy of these pistols and the introduction of the pikemen. And you talked about the 5-meter length pikes. If you can only get this close, these guns were so inaccurate. They actually ended up doing nothing. They started just towards the end. They were so effective early on, and they just became useless towards this.
It's probably
period.
why Gustavus was getting frustrated with them, and he was like, "Enough of this! Enough of this! The cavalry charges back, baby. We're going old school." Back.
So I'm going to do a little bit more about this and talk something a bit sideways, which is then be the Hakkapelit. So these are the Finnish cavalry, and their name originates from their battle cry in Finnish, which is Hakkapelit. I hope I got that right.
I really hope we get a Finnish listener to tell us how good that was.
You have to put your emphasis on the hat and the pa. Hakkapelit.
Sounds like Italian. Hakkapelit.
I don't know how to do it. That's just me doing it wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. My Finnish accent isn't there, I guess. But so that roughly translates to "cut them down."
Oh, nice.
Which is cool battle cry.
That is cool.
So a lot of their fame is actually kind of a modern byproduct. There is actually no evidence that they were more effective than the Swedish cavalry. It was more just I think the name, even the name of the Hakkapelit and Hakkapelita, I've seen them called as well. That's a modern name. It's not actually what they call the time. It's just they've developed it from that battle cry.
That's interesting.
That was more that was written down. They were just part of the cavalry. They had their own Finnish units, but they were no particularly better or worse than the Swedes themselves.
It's interesting how often that happens in history, isn't it? Like in our House of Lancaster series, and we were talking about like the Wars of the Roses and how famous that is, but actually in reality it wasn't called that at the time, right? And it's more of an after effect. I believe the trouble of the times, I believe was one of the things they called. But anyway, back to Scandinavia.
Back to Scandinavia. So I'm going to talk generally more about Swedish cavalry then, because hopefully, if people want it in the future, we'll talk more specifically about Finland. We're going to do potentially some stuff about the
that's right.
The breakout nations that you have. I can't remember the specific revolutions.
Yep.
That's it. So what the specific revolution? So we can talk more specifically about that. So we talk more generalist about the Swedish own cavalry. They were a bit different from their European counterparts. The Swedish cavalry horses. There was a specific breed of horse called Klippare. And again, I probably butchered that, but you probably won't even know it because it's incredibly hard to find. I found this buried in some specific Swedes research about the cavalry of the time. They were hardly much larger than ponies, about like 150 centimeters or 4'11", which, if you've seen a modern horse, is minuscule. So these were they're ragged, hardy, easy to train, and didn't really panic much in the smoke, sound, and movement of the battlefield. So what? Yeah,
no, that's very useful for the time period, given how much smoke and panic there was.
But apparently, it's interesting that Swedish noblemen were often ashamed of the low stature and small size of their horses compared to like the European horses.
That's so funny. That's why is that not even surprising? That's just.
I know, it's because like look at how big their horses are. They're not tiny horses. But it kind of makes sense as well. These horses have to survive in like kind of harsh, like Scandinavian conditions. Like they're not there in these kind of lush fields.
It's such a good point as well. I remember reading a thing about when I mentioned how they're moving from like these heavy knights towards these sort of lighter armors and stuff. One of the reasons they were doing that is because quite often on campaign, the knights of these heavy horses, because they were bred to be so much bigger and stronger, so they can carry so much more weight, they would actually die of starvation, like during the long marches and stuff, because there wasn't enough food for them. So that's actually one of the advantages of moving towards the demi-lancer, moving towards the cuirassier and all this stuff. Cuirassier?
That's exactly my next point, which is they were able to survive periods of illness low to no further than their European counterparts. So they had a lower percentage of just when the battle was ready to go, that my horse is sick, my horse has died. I don't have a horse anymore. I can't go into battle on horseback. So they as much as they were at the point of cavalry, battle's ready to go, they would way like to have their cavalry in a ready position. So they also lighter horses may have had less weight in the charge, but they often actually had more stamina and lasted longer on the battlefield before they had to rest. I guess as well, it's this thing of like bigger is like when people like really muscly guys generally have less fitness. It's kind of quite often goes in parallel. If you see somebody who's super fit, they're generally not really muscly as well. Sometimes you have the freaks of nature, but most
Yeah.
often it's one or the other. So these ones are, I would say, almost feel like they're better in some aspects of that kind of fighting style that they
Yeah.
needed to do.
It's amazing. You never really, before you look into this stuff, you never really think about how much goes into like war horses and how many different breeds and for what specific things. I'm only learning about this while we started this podcast, and now also cannons. Two things that I just thought like horse, cannon. I fully understand these topics. Absolutely not. Each one is like their own PhD discipline. It's crazy.
Yeah, the paper I found, which was talking about the Swedish horses, was about 55 pages, just talking about horses. I was just
That's mad. That's mad.
I just found the bits I needed in there.
Yeah.
This guy loves his cavalry horses.
It's quite funny though. Obviously, for those of you new to the podcast, Rob and I, we don't share what we've got until the episode. So we go off, we split up some broad topics, we research stuff and come back. I'm finding it funny that this time we've both like found the same things interesting to bring back to each other. We've overlapping a bit, but yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, literally, I've got a whole section now about the Caracol and why it was changed by Gustavus, and you've already covered. It doesn't need to be anymore. We both got really interested by the same bits. But the last thing I'll mention is there's the most elite unit of the Swedish-Finnish cavalry kind of came later. This was under Charles XII. So they were called the Drabant Corps. And they were armed with sword, carbine, and pairs of pistols. So people know the modern carbine, but the older carbine is kind of a shorter musket, is the best way to describe it. Moving on from there, you're going to tell us a bit more about the Caroleans, I hope now, which is again from Charles XII period.
Yeah, the Caroleans, or in Swedish, let's get this right, baby. I'm really challenging myself. Carolinerna, right? So these are the Swedish. These are Sweden's elite.
Is this like an anglicized way of saying it? Is that Carolean? It's just the anglicized version?
Well, it comes from the word. So the word Carolean literally is in Latin just means Carolus, which means Charles. Right. So it means like Charles's dudes, like Charles. Right. And if you remember from the previous episode, Karl with the K is how the Swedish say Charles. So it's like Karl's boys, basically, right? So essentially, these were, as we've referenced a few times, quality over quantity. Sweden's well-trained and disciplined soldiers. There's three things going for them that put them above every other troop, probably, I would say, maybe even in Europe. I'm going to go there. I'm going to say they're best soldiers of Europe at the time. 1, absolute discipline. 2, shock attack tactics. And 3, faith-based morale. These guys would charge in, screaming with bayonets, like no fear. And just to really demonstrate how awesome these guys were, just to be clear, in case it wasn't obvious, they are Caroleans under Charles the 11th and Charles the 12th, as I kind of alluded to based on their name. So these are two Swedish kings towards the end of the empire's time period. We're talking late 1600s now, start of 1700s at this point. So long past Gustavus II and all that. And I want to tell a story that happens during the Great Northern War. Which, Rob, you covered last episode, the Great Northern War, which was what put an end to the Swedish Empire by Russia. There was a battle where Charles XII, who was only 18 at the time, he took 10,000 Caroleans and Drabant Corps, which was his personal guard, which you referenced, Rob. And they took on 40,000 Russians. 10,000 versus an army of 40,000. It was called the Battle of Narva. This is modern-day Estonia. So some caveats that people should know. The Russians were inexperienced, poorly coordinated, and just had low morale. On the day of the attack, there was a blizzard that flew directly into the faces of the Russian defenders, which obscured the entire Swedish approach.
Oh, that is
talk
that
about
rough.
being unlucky. Talk about getting unlucky.
And then you can see I think they had God on their side. Religious fervor, that's going to add to it.
Well, there was also, I found some reports, although mixed reports, but I believe it to be true, that the Russians were also super drunk when the Swedes arrived. Like the commanders and stuff were absolutely hammered.
And it's a good authority that they were pissed.
Yes, I have it on good authority that there was plenty of vodka. Did vodka exist back then? Something for a bonus topic.
Yeah. Vodka is an old drink.
Let's talk about drinks in the next episode, actually. The next episode is going to be covering the average life of Swedes in the time period, and it'll be the final adventure into the Swedes. Yeah, let's make a note of that. That'll be really fun. So anyway, Charles launched a bold frontal assault, breaking through Russian lines with bayonet and sabers. The Swedish losses were 600, roughly, of course. 600. The Russian losses were over 10,000. Captured, killed. Imagine that. Most of them trying to, I think they died, they drowned in another river trying to escape and stuff like that. And the rest of them, they ran off. And remember, this is Sweden attacking a defensible position as well. This is Russia had Narva. Sweden was taking it, taking it back. So this
should always be that at the detriment, especially in this time period.
Yeah, defenders' advantage, always a thing. I mean, it's arguably a thing right now. If you look at some of the current world conflicts, but we won't go there, right? Anyway, so this was the biggest win for Sweden.
This is rivaling Agincourt, which if people want to list our House of Lancaster series, that was covered out there.
These numbers are mad, right? This is the biggest win for Sweden in the war. And I don't know, but I would guess maybe their biggest win ever. Like that, these numbers are absolutely huge. Unfortunately, though, it did lead to young Charles XII, 18-year-old mind that he is, becoming quite overconfident in himself and his troops. And so this actually was seen as a big reason why he started underestimating the enemy in future conflicts. He didn't know about the terrible state of the Russians. He didn't know that they had low morale, that they were, probably drunk, all of this kind of stuff. He didn't know about all the circumstances that I just mentioned. So when he attacked, which to be fair, actually, that just makes him even braver, in my opinion. Guy's got 10,000 dude. He's going up against 40,000. He doesn't know their condition is awful right now, and he still goes for it. That's amazing, right? That's a testament to the Caroleans. But he would always overestimate himself and his troops going forwards, and he would always, crucially, underestimate the Russians from that point onwards, which would, as we know, eventually go on to lose Sweden in the war. In an alternate timeline, maybe the Swedish Empire, it would still be a powerful entity today, but instead the Russians ended up becoming the big boys that would lead into the modern period.
I still think, which we talked about in the previous episode, the plague and the famine still did so much damage. I think that even with that, I don't think they had a chance.
And just for those of you who are watching, I have some Caroleans on the screen here because I just want to point out that my favorite thing, despite everything I've just said, is their outfit. Oh my god, look at the drip! That is some fire outfits. I would wear that today. Imagine walking through that beautiful blue and yellow just goes so well together. If you go to the next image as well.
Oh, it's also one before I shift to the next image. That is when we're talking about the cannons. Those are the cannons that were the after the leather cannon. That's what they developed. That's because it's quite mobile. You can see it's a small little cannon. That is what they developed into afterwards.
Yes, so obviously this is towards the end of the Swedish timeline. We're looking towards the early 1700s at this point. The leather cannons, I'm guessing, was more of a 1600s thing.
Correct, 1620 to 1640-ish.
Yeah. And I just thought I'd put an image of Charles XII here himself, because I know we've talked a lot about Gustavus II and stuff, but there were other great Swedish kings, and obviously we don't have time to cover everything. But good old Karl XII, Charles XII, the Swedish king here, who would actually ultimately die during the Great Northern War as well, when Sweden ended up losing that. And that is all I've got. I'll pass back to you for conversations about the Royal Guard.
The Royal Guard, so these are... the Royal Guard Pikeman Unit, or Dalkarl. The Dalkarl, I was looking into kind of what that word is. It's kind of the same as saying Londoner, but gendered. So it's a man from Dalarna.
Okay.
That's what a Dalkarl is. So Dalarna is a county in central Sweden, kind of northwest of Stockholm. So there is a famous regiment called the Dalarna Regiment, which is actually still a regiment in the Swedish army today.
Oh. I love that.
So
stuff.
it has its... I know, me too. So during the 30 Years' War is kind of in its origins. So they were mostly recruited from the Dalarna region, and they're a mixture of pikemen and muskets. So all soldiers in this time period, this is again the start of the early 30 Years' Wars, we're going back on ourselves, carried swords, but a third had pikes and the rest had muskets. So even though these are pikemen in game, generally in this period, the Dalarna Regiment would have been a mixture of pikemen and muskets. That's all regiments did that, because it just for to be able to work in terms of formations, you need to have all as part of one regiment. You didn't have the separate musket and pikeman regiment. They all need to have to be able to work together while creating formations. So having one regiment of mixed kind of arms, it gave a much more cohesive fighting unit. So, in this time period, the dominant way of organizing infantry on the battlefield was something called the Spanish Tercio. So, you want to bring up the screen again for people explaining
I
it.
referenced Tercio. I didn't explain what it was, but I referenced Tercio in the 30 Years' War segment of the previous episode.
So, I believe it is in Spanish, but you can kind of see. So, it's in essence a square which will have the center is full of pikemen with muskets on the outside, and then borders of groups of either it's a kind of harquebusiers or muskets. So it's kind of a mixture of the two. They could be intertwined. It kind of depends on the time period of when you move between harquebusiers and musketeers. So that bit's kind of open. Have you seen the center, by the way? That's actually a band. They had a band playing in the very center, so like inspire all the troops.
That's
so it'd be
awesome,
like the trumpets. They're like, I mean, it makes sense. You play your own tunes.
I mean, there's music gets everyone in line, gets everyone in. Yeah, absolutely. I think we often underestimate the importance of a band. I mean, otherwise you're just standing there in silence. You just got your own thoughts, and you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. Oh my god, I'm gonna die. There's 40,000 of them and only 10,000 of us. That kind of thing.
Yeah. So in the late 1500s, early 1600s, this was kind of the dominating formation, and I feel like a lot of the stuff with formations is kind of this kind of rock paper scissors almost, but more complicated. Rock paper scissors spear pike. It's so a spear musket, which should I say, pike musket. So this was the dominating one. So what Gustavus was kind of working out was how do we beat this formation? And he kind of noticed a couple problems. So first problem he saw was in the Tercio, a lot of soldiers actually weren't doing much fighting. Half the musketeers couldn't get a clear shot. Many of the pikemen were just actually added weight without ever engaging in the enemy directly. So Gustavus took inspiration from a Dutch commander called Maurice of Orange. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, but I love the fact that he's from Orange. It's very Dutch.
So he took some concepts that he done and pushed those ideas further and create up with something called the Swedish Brigade. So this is the Swedish Brigade. So it's smaller, more flexible groups. So imagine that formation we just saw, which is the Spanish Tercio. Imagine that's like kind of very set. It's like kind of like imagine that's a rock. A rock doesn't change shape. This is like the sea. This is like about all fluidity. So this is like an example of it. So this is if you kind of look at the colors of this, the white kind of squares you're seeing are pikemen, and the blue squares are musketeers. But I wouldn't be too strict on the formation. It's just basically lines of white with blues on the edges. But again, it doesn't really matter. The whole point of this formation was about fluidity. It was about about musketeers taking shots, moving behind pikemen. It's all about everything moving in a way which allowed all the musketeers to get their shots, move behind the pikemen for cover from enemy cavalry charges, move out again once they've reloaded, getting their shots. And it's all about this kind of fluidity,
maximum efficiency, right?
Maximum efficiency, exactly.
Can you explain it a bit for audio only?
Okay. So you can see there's kind of images of there's cannons in the kind of central line with pikemen units behind those cannons. They're calling a triangular blob at the front. And in between those, on the edges and the center and behind, there is a set of musketeers as groups. So to the right of them, in between in the triangle, and then behind it. And there's a third group even behind that of pikemen with again a border of musketeers. And again, what would happen is these musketeers would shoot, move in any way, and the pikemen would also move in any way which they found effective. So this tactic was really effective, but was very, very difficult to pull off. It required like tight discipline, lots of training, and the more mercenaries that Sweden started using, especially after the 1630s, many of the troops didn't have the skill or cohesion to use this tactic as well. So they'd have like elite kind of like the Dalkarls themselves. The Dalarna regiment, they will be performing this regiment while kind of other of them may have used more simplistic formations to kind of as they move forward in the battle.
That's really cool, man. That's really cool. And again, it's just coming back to these same themes for Sweden. quality over quantity. Like Gustavus couldn't pull this off with troops who were untrained. Sweden's army was trained, was drilled, they knew what they were doing, and they'd go up against armies of just peasants, you know, like people, some lord pulled all the farmers over and said, time to go and fight. You know, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They were coming up against the elite tactics like this. Again, the father of modern warfare. Is one of Gustavus's titles, and it's definitely down to things like this, I imagine. Yeah, amazing. All right, should we move on to bonus topics?
Let's do it. I'm interested to know what you got today.
So mine is actually, you know, it's less immature than some of my previous ones. It's more of a question, and it's a question for you, and maybe we've touched on it a few times. And essentially, it's this: now that we've come to the end of the Swedish Empire at this point, who would you say over those, is it 100 years, 100-year time periods, roughly,
Ish, yeah.
was their main rival? And I'm going to give you some contenders, and you might already have an answer, and this is for the viewers too. Okay, contestant number 1. Play some music as they run to the stage. Denmark, Norway! They're old buddies from the Kalmar Union. Scandinavian bros for life. These guys essentially have going to war.
Bros is in this time period. It's not the word I'd use.
Yeah. they went to war so many times, even sometimes on the same side. Like in the 30 Years' War, they're both on the same side, Protestants. When they were fighting against the Holy Roman Empire, and they competed over trade routes and pretty much were always interacting, given their proximity. They've been there since before the beginning, the middle, the end. I mean, even during the Great Northern War, we didn't go into loads of detail. While it may have been against Russia, it was actually a coalition of other forces like Saxony and whatnot, and included, once again, the Denmark-Norway. These guys are always all up in Sweden's business, and I'd say they're a strong contender for Sweden's main rival. If you had to pick one, you know, like a Pokemon game where you pick one Pokemon, they pick the opposite one. Is it these guys? Or is it contestant number 2, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth? Baltic supremacy can't come without the Baltic coast, which, as we mentioned in the previous episode, is super important for Sweden controlling the entire Baltic Sea. So therefore, conflict with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is inevitable, and it's also the place where Gustavus, the Lion of the North, would learn, as we mentioned, a lot to develop these tactics that he would go on to use that we've been talking about in this episode. There were also, which we haven't mentioned so far, but there were also dynastic ties. So King Sigismund III of Poland, he was also a deposed king of Sweden. That's right, he was a vassal. So essentially, he was elected to be the king of Poland, which, by the way, super cool about Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, that they actually had elections in this time and picked their leader. The only place to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of them were manipulated by Russia, and it led to their downfall, but some things never change, eh?
Yeah, I must say that's...
Are we allowed to talk about that? I don't know. But if you want to stay tuned for future episodes about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, we will go there, because I want to go there. I love Poland and their history. Anyway, so he was king of Poland in 1587 through election. But then
Sigismund is a cool character as well.
He then inherited via his father the King of Sweden, and he became King of Sweden in 1592. So for a while, he was king of both places. But he was Catholic, and he spent most of his time in Poland, and so Sweden didn't really want him in charge, so they deposed him and put someone else on the throne. So you could argue, dynastically, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, were they the biggest rival? Maybe. Maybe not. Number 3, the next contestant, the Holy Roman Empire, or the Habsburg monarchy of the Holy Roman Empire specifically. Primarily, I'm talking about the 30 Years' War here, considering that this was their biggest, longest, most significant conflict that put them on the map. This is where Sweden came to fame, and it's also the enemy who killed Gustavus II, Gustavus the hero, the Lion of the North. It's also a religious war, Catholics versus Protestants, super significant during the time periods. Perhaps worthy of the title of main rival, maybe, maybe not. From a religious lens, it could be. Or the final contestant, the Russian Empire. The conflict since the start, when they first took the Baltic Sea, all the way to losing it at the end. The enemy that defeated the Swedish Empire, ended their superpower status. They fought over Finland so many times. They fought over Poland, the Baltics. The war's pretty much as frequent as Denmark-Norway. So, Rob,
okay,
4 contestants. Who do you choose?
So, my gut was Russia before you started kind of, and it makes you think more as you you just want to say something and then you think more about it. So my first one to exclude is HRE.
Okay.
As much if you told me who was the Gustavus's main rival, I would go HRE. If you were to go who's the Swedish Empire's main rival, I don't think it can be just because of the shorter time period. I think it's just it's not enough. And even during those periods, it was still involvement of Polish-Lithuania. Even during the 30s War, they had separate wars directly with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So I don't think it can be them. Denmark-Norway, that's a very interesting one because there's so much history tied together with them, and it's tough.
You're struggling. When I first asked the question, I saw your face, and you're like, "Yeah, I already know who. This is an easy question."
And then you think, and you're like, "Oh no, I don't know. I don't know." Because they have had so many conflicts, so significant. But I would say, in terms of land moving hands, less so than I would say Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the kind of Russian Empire, Tsardom of Russia. My instinct is one of two, and I think because of it being their final, I think my gut, I'm sticking with the Tsardom of Russia.
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer, and
I think to us they're all good answers. Apart from HRE, I disagree with that one.
Well, you know what I would say. Some of the things we didn't talk about is that the Habsburgs have played a role in the deluge as well. Which is the dissolution of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They went against Sweden, so they got involved again. So there is like continuation of the storyline, but it's definitely not main character territory. I think you're right. And for me, it's got to be between Denmark, Norway, and Russia. And maybe I'll agree with you and say Russia. I guess it depends how you define rivalry. Yeah, because Denmark, Norway is just like. These guys,
I think they're involved, but if they're sometimes as your ally, that doesn't make you your rival.
That's true. As far as I'm aware,
when I think they've ever been on the same side.
That's it. I was just about to say, as far as I'm aware, someone wants to correct us. They've never been on the same side.
Yeah.
They were both destroying Poland at the same time, but they weren't actually friends, right? They were just destroying them from different directions, and they were like, well, if the Russians are taking them there, let's go here while they're distracted with the Russians, and vice versa. And eventually, when Poland was destroyed, it's not as if they shook hands and went separate ways. They immediately started going at it. And in fairness, Russia kind of beat them back there as well, like back towards the Baltic coast. So, I agree with you, man. It's gonna have to be Russia, the Russian Empire. Yeah. That's mine. What about yours?
Okay. Did you know Gustavus may have died because he's short-sighted?
No way. What happened?
So he was short-sighted and refused to wear armor. So he stopped wearing armor after he was wounded in 1627 in the battle against the Poles, and the wound made armor feel uncomfortable, apparently. So the battle in which he died was the Battle of Lutzen, which was foggy, and there was also smoke from cannon fire. And he apparently the part of the reason he got shot was he got disconnected from his army. He got disconnected. He was a little bit in no man's land. So was it short-sightedness that contributed to his death?
So he was actually short-sighted, confirmed.
Yeah. Well, from what I found, he was. From what I've discovered, he was short-sighted. Maybe that's what he died from.
That's interesting. That's like, you know what, you've got me thinking, like, when the hell did they even invent glasses? Because I know there was monocles and stuff.
They're definitely a Chinese invention. I believe around the 1500s, but
I'm going to look this up for a future bonus topic for sure. Here's a better question. When did they first invent sunglasses? When did people start looking hella cool?
You know what? I've just looked it up separately. They're 13th century in Italy. So I'm so wrong.
Glasses?
So wrong.
Okay, what about sunglasses though? That's the more important one.
20th century.
Okay, there you go.
They definitely did have sunglasses. That's